Hello, this is another episode of AyAyAyAi, where we have either the excitement about artificial intelligence and machine learning, or we're down by it. So that's why we call it AyAyAyAi. In all languages, you can express AyAyAyAi either to show your excitement, or your frustration, your disappointment, or just that you're tired by whatever it is that you're communicating. So today we have, I would say all three of us are very excited about AI machine learning. So, let's get our guest, Mike Lingle, into the introduction because Mike has some extensive knowledge about technologies and we would like to incorporate AI machine learning conversation into it. Mike?
Great. My name is Mike Lingle, and I'm here on AyAyAi, the podcast. I am excited about AI. I love technology. I started my career as a software developer. I've started a bunch of tech startups, done the whole raising money thing. And then for the past decade, a little more than a decade, I've worked with a bunch of other entrepreneurs, helping them launch their businesses with their fundraising. And I've gone deep into the tech world. I've hung out with a bunch of futurists. I do a lot of blockchain stuff. And always, I think one of the things with AI and with any technology, there's so much cool stuff that we can do, and that especially so much cool stuff that we can do in the future. But when we're starting businesses, when we're launching startups, there's always a question of like, what can we do now, right? Like, how do we succeed now? And that's what I've always tried to do is hold that vision, right? This is where we're going, and ground it in some kind of reality where we can create a business and have that business function today.
And with me, I also have my guest co-host. Excuse me. Mike Lingle is my guest. Lucky is my co-host. Lucky.
Yes, sir. Not much of a host today, but I'll give it a go. I can't do it. AI. That was horrible. Hey, but you know what? I don't mind sounding silly. I'm gonna give it one more go. Hey, and I have nothing. I have nothing.
You've been chasing your dog around all day long.
Yeah.
We can
So
tell
hey,
just from your voice.
yeah. Today is just thank you, Lord, for AI. But yeah, I'm excited. You know, there's certain areas that I I still don't know enough about, and I'm curious of how it's gonna at least roll out or start to develop, and how Web 3.0 and how um, AI or machine learning, and also how blockchain is going to really affect Web 3.0 and how we understand the internet. And I'm sure you have a unique perspective on that, being part of that, at least that area of technology from Web 2.0 and going into 3.0. And I'm curious to say, what have you done, or what have you learned more so from going from the 2.0 to 3.0?
I think the 3.0 creates a bunch of possibilities, right? And I think in general, as humans, right, we watch technology move quickly, and technology probably moves the quickest of anything we see, and that's what creates all these possibilities, right? Things like society and culture and laws, those things all infrastructure, those things all move more slowly, right? Culture probably moves relatively quickly, but slower than technology, and laws and infrastructure move slowest of all, right? And so there's all kinds of shiny stuff out there with the tech. And I don't know, I think one of the things I've learned is to kind of wait for my opportunities that speak to me and then try to get the timing right. And again, it comes back to like, what's going to happen in the future that we're talking about today versus what can we actually do today? And I'll give a couple examples. So, AI, self-driving cars, right? Fully self-driving cars.
Oh yeah.
I worked on a project in 2017 where all the futurists told me that next year, self-driving cars were coming next year, right? Now we're in 2022 and full self-driving is farther away than next year. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't get in your Tesla and it can do some things really well, right? It can park itself, it can come to you, but there are lots of problems with that, right? So there are cool things we can do today, but full self-driving is not one of them. Um, so that's an example of technology just not being able to keep up.
Yeah.
An example of timing technology perfectly is Uber, right? We'd all been in taxis and limousines forever. We all had I mean, I lived in New York City. I had numbers for black car services, so I could just call
Hmm.
and get a car. Uber came along at exactly the right moment, right? We had iPhones, we had Google Maps, right? We had the ability to replace this system that we were using, and they saw that and used the right technology, right at the right moment
Yep.
to completely transform an industry, right? And they just caught the moment correctly. And they've obviously gotten better since then, right? In the whatever 10, 15 years since Uber launched, we've had all kinds of technical advances, but they were basically able to do what they wanted to do at the beginning and then improve it from there.
So, and it goes without saying about the law, because law is what banned Uber in DC. Was almost banning, got Uber shut down in DC, because DC was the primary city where Uber was, originated from. And guess what? Guess what Uber did? Reached out to all of its users and said, "Could you write to your congressman today and tell them not to ban us?"
Mhm.
And literally, whoever was opposing Uber was on the one that supported Uber at the end, because the constituents reached out and said, "Yeah, you got to keep Uber running in the city, because alternative is not that great."
I remember that. I
Yeah,
remember
that was
that.
such a
Yeah.
controversy. I mean, the controversy hasn't ended with Uber and Airbnb since the day they started. But the thing is, the alternative is what people look at and said, well, there's got to be an alternative to Uber and Airbnb, maybe, right? Because I think there's some losses happening with Airbnb, and the user satisfaction is going down. Uber user and driver satisfaction is going down. So there's lots of talk on these capabilities that we have today that might bring in a new technology and company around for next 5, 10 years. Who knows? I think Uber has been around since 2011, so 10 plus years. Who knows how long they will last, right? Um, what one thing that you mentioned is the law and the culture and the technology and the infrastructure. I'm the infrastructure guy. Like I am all about infrastructure. And when I hear of blockchain, infrastructure is what worries me the most about blockchain. I know there's cryptocurrency and there's all the other technology that's laid on top of blockchain that is shiny and very attractive and very easy for people to discuss. But the infrastructure on bottom of the blockchain is what worries me, because look, the encryption, right? Very worrisome, because we talk about quantum computing being able to break this encryption faster. The infrastructure, as in the hardware, like we saw the shortages of hardware, the shortages of GPUs, people buying GPUs not for the reasons of gaming or video. They're just buying it for processing. And these kind of infrastructure worries, the shortages that we've seen for the last 2 years prominently, but even prior to that, we had shortages because semiconductor chips and things like that are being built overseas, not in US, right? So supply chain has always been an issue that I've looked at very carefully and with some worry, but at the same time, there's some optimistic things that are happening with White House putting out CHIPS Act, spending $52 billion to have all the chips to be manufactured in the United States, so that way we can manufacture and export them overseas for the usage. Um, tell us a little bit more about all the things that you mentioned. I know it doesn't have to be infrastructure wise. Like, what are you seeing as far as blockchain, as the society, the law, the infrastructure, the culture? How is that playing out with blockchain in your perspective?
I mean, if you want to talk about the infrastructure of blockchain, I think uh, just to take an example, I think it's really interesting. Like if you look at Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin was the original digital decentralized currency, right? Like they just broke it wide open, right? You could create a trustless system, which many have argued is perfect. Others have argued is imperfect because of the energy usage. right? And in fact, when you talked about the quantum computing, right, quantum computers will be able to crack the encryption. Um, but they created this decentralized digital currency, right? A few years later, Ethereum came along, and what Ethereum added, so if Bitcoin's digital money, what Ethereum added is programmable digital money, right? So they have smart contracts, and that allows you to program intelligence into the money, so that you don't have to be there watching every transaction. You can trust the money to do what you want it to do based on whatever rules you want to set up, right? Now, we see all kinds of hacks. Obviously, no system is perfect. And I actually make a joke that lawyers exist for the same reason that software bugs do, right? Lawyers are there because contracts can't cover every case, right? Whatever, when you're in a relationship, in a business relationship, there's always something someone can do on one side that's not covered in the contract, right? So you need the lawyers and the judges and the legal system to come in and figure it out. On the software side, you have bugs, right? No softwares are like contracts, software is like contracts, but these are always incomplete systems that don't handle every case, right? So software bugs exist for the same reason. And that means any system is going to be gameable, hackable. It's always going to be incomplete, and you're always going to need some kind of moderation to step in, or things will break, right? People will lose money. But what I like about Ethereum is not just that it's programmable money, but that the community works hard to keep it updated, right? So with Bitcoin, it's very pure and they're going to stay their path. With Ethereum, you see them making big changes over time, right? They completely changed the way the blockchain runs. They completely changed the infrastructure, right? And so when we're thinking about technology, right, what I see is Ethereum modernizing itself, even though it maybe moves slower than we would like, especially if we have Ethereum locked up in the network and we can't unstake it. And Bitcoin is making updates, but they're not doing the radical changes in order to keep up with the technology. So I'm always a fan of, and I think that's part of what comes with blockchain. It's not just infrastructure, but it's also governance, right? And what you're seeing is differences in governance. Like Ethereum has what feels to me like a very vibrant governance and a very active governance, versus Bitcoin is much more about let's work as hard as we can to maintain the status quo as long as we can.
Yeah, being dynamic does not pay off, right? Where Ethereum has a longer vision for the smart contract, rather than to say this is just a currency you can bet on, right? I think there's a big difference, and people that are paying attention, they're recognizing that point, because if the smart contract is what you're based on, how could you use that smart contract to be a currency, right? So that way we can actually trust an exchange of whatever it is we're purchasing using Ethereum, right? Um, I would say the use case for AI machine learning here is that amount of data it generates, amount of trust you need with those data generation. Machine learning is going to be that shining key that is not the encryption, but the one that creates the user experience unlike any other. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what separates out Uber from a taxi driver, right? Because Uber in itself is like, for techies that are listening, they will understand API. But for non-techies, Uber is just layers of APIs, right? Mm-hmm. Uber really didn't create everything from the scratch. They went and got something from Google, something from AWS, something from this website and that website, and connected multiple APIs layers in order to provide that service. And that's how machine learning plays out for blockchain or any blockchain related technology. That if a machine learning is layered in between the services that users are experiencing, which is that, let's say, the feature of currency, feature of smart contract, whatever it is, you might not see machine learning up front. But machine learning is what's going to provide that user experience, which is very sustainable, very scalable, and the user experience that people want to come back and reutilize, rather than to say, one time I'm done because the user experience was so bad, right? Mm-hmm. So I think machine learning is highly capable of creating the user experience for any blockchain product, right? To be able to say, like, you can trust the 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 third party on the other side, because
Hmm.
as a machine learning, I am giving you the score for that third party, so you can trust that third party with the score number I'm giving it, right? As in, is it 51% or is it 100%, or what's their utilization rate look like for that third party, and if the utilization rate is high, and what was the score like for previous users through reviews. Machine learning can provide all these, right? I think machine learning and AI will be. I think you mentioned a book, which I think I need to read. Please make that introduction as well, because like you mentioned, blockchain, AI, and Web 3.0 combined will become the future user experience, right? And that's perfect, because if you have blockchain to create that smart contract, that transaction, right, which is to be executed, and you have Web 3.0, which is the read part. Again, I'm
Hmm.
making some Linux reference here, but Linux reference is that read, write, and execute, right? So if there was a blockchain that was to execute, whereas a machine learning is writing it, because machine learning is able to do all this writing, or
Hmm.
I'm using the writing very vaguely, but I
Hmm.
think you get my point. When you were reading on a Web 3.0, how do
Yeah.
you write that using machine learning and AI? And
Well.
how do you execute using a blockchain to build that trust over time
Hmm.
and maintain that trust through machine learning and AI is something to keep an eye out for, because I think that's a big difference between Web 2.0 and Web 3.0 is that, we're talking about Web 1.0, you just had to read. You couldn't write or execute. And then Web 2.0, you started reading and writing, because you started putting comments in, and you're able
Hmm.
to plug things in as a user. And then Web 3.0 is the keyword of the execute, as in you're able to execute smart contract through Web 3.0. You're able to really experience beyond just reading and writing, right? You're able to take control over your data, as in to say, this is my data from now on. If you want to use it, you got to pay me a penny per usage. Right? So lots of potential, but I'm going all over the place here just to capture the frame that machine learning will be that middle piece that is able to keep all these things together, right? The user experience for Web 3.0, user experience for that blockchain product, whatever that blockchain product is.
Hmm.
We want to be able to capsulate all three of these and say, yeah, what do you want in Web 3.0? What do you want in blockchain, right? And how do you utilize machine learning for that? So I
I've
think we
actually
talked
seen a
about
few
blockchain a
things.
little bit. So Web 3.0. Let's get into that. Lucky.
Yeah, Asif, I've actually seen, and this is just recent, and I know I've talked about this a lot in our previous podcast, but it's become a lot more a buzz as generative AI. I don't know if you guys can understand that with my voice, but generative AI has become really hot. For the most part, what that is, and if for our viewers out there, you can basically use applications to create your own art, like Mid Journey and Stable Diffusion. But today, I actually was right before this podcast. I was looking up, just what's new in AI, what's hot, and just trying to see, what's different. And I actually found something that actually speaks to what we're all talking about. It was a Web 3.0 interface that supported something new. It was voice AI. It's not art AI, but basically they can take samples of your voice, and an AI can make you sound like an angel. Like it'll make some kind of song from your voice, and you'll get pitches and sounds that that you can't hit. Just like me earlier, trying to say "ay AI." I had nothing. Well, the AI, the generative AI, it's so nifty because it ties Web 3.0 with artificial generative AI, and then at the end it ties it into an NFT or something that you can convert it to, and it uses Ethereum. Now that you're bringing it up, it uses Ethereum to create the blockchain for whatever art you create. So
Right.
now all you do is go to a website. You go to hollyplus.com, or actually I don't know the URL, but it's Holly Plus if you look it up, and you can just drop a voice sample down, and it'll create music from your AI generated music from your voice, and it'll be your voice, one of one. Of course, there will be the AI doesn't use any other. It uses some kind of artificial intelligence, and it talks more about the creator of it if you go to it. But that's really interesting that we're talking about it now, and I just see. where also you can do the same thing with stable diffusion. And I didn't put it together, but I use stable diffusion to create art, AI art. And so much like Mid Journey, and so you can suggest like cat, dog, and all of a sudden you got cat, dogs, and art. You can suggest cat, dog, and Vincent Van Gogh. All of a sudden, Vincent Van Gogh is alive, creating new art that, of course, we wish he could create, but the AI does that. And you can also tie that to blockchain. And it's wild how all of a sudden that's now options. I didn't think we'd be there until, I mean, we're having this conversation.
I just want to crack a joke here and say, can you generate an image of Metallica, Akon, and T Pain being really, really mad that they didn't have this technology 20 years ago?
Yeah.
T
I
Pain and Akon would
Yeah,
love voice AI at this point, and Metallica would love to save their music from Napster.
right. Yeah, some of the generative AI stuff is really cool. Like you just put in a text command and you get a full image back.
Right.
I've been using it. I do a lot of pitch deck work with startups, and I've been starting to use it for some of the slide imagery because I can just get the right image,
yeah.
and some of it looks really, really good. I've been
Mhm.
impressed.
Yeah, I've
I
been
think
trying to
user
fine tune
experience is
that.
going to be great with these money saving methods.
Yeah, it's interesting now. It's there. We're there. Blockchain, NFTs, Web 3.0, and now real. 6 months ago, we wouldn't be having this discussion about having generative AI and people actually using it, out in the user community. And now it's there, and it's fantastic. And so I look forward to being able to see how that works. See, I'm a big blockchain person. I'm sorry, I'm a Cardano person. So I don't know if that means anything, but
It's making a
Cardano.
comeback.
Yeah, I know, right?
Let's do it.
I'm a pugilist in life, and so I'm used to taking some hard punches in the face. And it looks like with Cardano, I took a real hard punch in the wallet. I
Uh-huh.
love Cardano, and I'm really excited about the technology. But again, you're right. There's certain things about Bitcoin and Ethereum changing the way they do business to match and save energy. There's a lot of changes within the blockchain community, and the one is the gas fees. Being able to process things and create art, but then not having those fees on top of what it takes to produce something or make an exchange. And so, as long as they start to reduce those, I think it'll become more of a usable technology.
Yeah, I mean, and the nice thing about a lot of this stuff is it's free to play with, right?
Mhm.
Um, like Dali is the one I've been using for the generative art, and they just released a free version that I can play with. And I can pay more if I want to pay more. Although I can pay in fiat, I haven't tried to pay in crypto yet.
Wow.
Uh, I used to do a ton of audio production and making beats and song production. So the idea of being able to generate voices on the fly would be awesome. That was always part of the challenge was getting the best out of the artist. But if you can just sit at home and get the best out of the computer, maybe that helps too. It's at
Yeah.
least another tool in the toolbox.
Well, we found out about the AI artist that has been recently assigned by Capitol Records. So
Oh,
we're
right.
not that far off of artists that are AI. It's just the AI will have a master, and the master will tell AI to make the music, and the master will take it to the record company like Capitol Records and have them release it. Right?
Yeah.
Just cannot imagine all the use cases of NFTs and a blockchain technology to secure the income generated by that AI music. But Web 3.0, tell us a little bit about that. Like, what's your take on Web 3.0, and what sort of blockchain are you looking to incorporate with Web 3.0?
So really, I mean, I break. Really, I think the core thing about Web 3.0 for me is ownership, right? Like, I think that's really what Web 3 is bringing to the table. And that plays out in a bunch of ways, right? It plays out in a data way, and I think you mentioned that earlier, right? There's more control for me over my data in a Web3 world. It also plays out in governance, right? So I can have input into decisions that affect the communities I'm involved in and the projects that I care about. right? I may own cryptocurrency, I may own NFTs, I may own other digital artifacts. Um, but it's really that sense of ownership that I think completely changes the interaction, right? I don't feel a real sense of ownership of Facebook other than my posts, right? They don't ask me for my opinion on their decisions, and they certainly don't give me any control of my own data, right?
Sure.
So being able to step into a world where we get that ownership, and again that decentralization, right, where we can take theoretically some of those middlemen out of the picture and really create sort of a shared ownership experience, I think is really where the power is. And we're seeing some companies, I forget their name, I think they're called like Teleport or Teleporter, but they're essentially trying to do Uber without Uber on the blockchain. So same service, but without Uber as the middleman.
Oh, without the 40% charge. Right. Got it.
Right. I mean, you'll always have the problem with Uber like systems where the drivers will need most of the money, unless you can raise the price.
I think, look, what Uber needs to do, that's what they do. But when a startup needs to do what they do, they will use blockchain technology, which is available through open source, AI machine learning that is almost very cheap to utilize, and Web 3.0 that is being built worldwide, regardless of how Facebook feels or how. I mean, Facebook already has its feelings hurt because Apple is blocking them, right? So Apple is causing all sorts of havoc for Facebook IPOs. Look, it's only a matter of time that somebody in Web 3.0 will come around and say, this is all open source, just like Linux. Go ahead and do what you got to do. Build your Web 3.0, build your blockchain. The business will happen as usual. It's just that somebody will come and outbid your 40% markup on your services to say, well, what about 40%? How about I charge you 1 cent per transaction? Because if I have millions of transactions, that's million cents that we make in a day, because that's the kind of usage we will have. Those are the kind of user experience we'll be able to provide to somebody who will, instead of driving for Uber, will drive for that future Web 3.0 based blockchain based technology. Um, I can see that like waking up in the morning. Like it's not even a dream. This is just like literally waking up every morning and saying, "Where's that guy at? Who's gonna build that next Uber technology?" It's just no.
Teleport. They just raised $9 million. It's built on Solana.
Thank you for whoever did that $9 million in venture capitalism, or however they got it funded. Thank you. Right? Isn't that a dream? This is literally about to happen, and I'm so excited about it because these machine learning components are increasing the user experience to the point that you might not need as complex of a system like Uber is. What you will need is a good intention to provide that user experience and scale that user experience and sustain that user experience over time. Because that's what Uber did. Uber created an experience for you rather than say, I'm going to give you the best rate possible, which they did for a while. But when it started raining in Manhattan and they charge you $100 for a ride that usually costs 40, um, well, that wasn't such a great user experience. But you get my point. Is that they had great user experience. It's just that they didn't sustain it for the whole duration of it, right? So the next technology, yeah, whoever gave 9 million to that to that new startup, woof, thank you.
You mentioned Apple, I think, and we've been talking about user experience. I feel like they're missing some real opportunities, just like basic stuff on the iPhone, where it's not even machine learning, but I think machine learning would be helpful, right? Like they have a reminders app, and the reminders app is like call so and so, right? So I call so and so, and the iPhone doesn't take it off my reminders app. You know what I mean? Like they're not using my day-to-day data. Apple is not using my day-to-day data in the iPhone to its maximum, right? I mean, that's just sort of a basic example, but I feel like they're really dropping the ball in the user experience because they're not using what I'm doing to improve my experience and customize my experience, right?
I I cannot agree with you more, right? Like Even Siri, I can. Okay, you know what? We'll talk about Siri from the sense that if the reminder app never existed, it was only Siri, and Siri was doing the task, and you weren't able to visualize. Okay, I made a mistake. I just said okay. I just said Siri, and my Siri just came on.
Yeah, she knows.
I will
I
say
can imagine.
SIRI, right?
Trash talking her, man. Be careful.
Don't trash talk SIRI when I'm in the podcast. Well, the point is, if you didn't have that the user interface, and it was all based on SIRI, right?
Yep.
Like that will be a total different exchange and of experience because now it's all based on that voice command. That voice command is taking care of all, right? So let's say, for example, at 12 o'clock, dial this number rather than me dialing it, right? Um, but SIRI asks you a question. Your voice assistant asks you a question like, "Hey, do you want to dial the number?" Yes, dial it now. So whatever Apple is going through, it's not fast enough. I think you mentioned that earlier that infrastructure is there, the technology is there, yet you are not moving in the fast pace. You are keeping up with your competition, which is that we know Apple is notorious for coming up with technology that's about 3 years old and calling it a brave innovation.
It
and
certainly pays the bills for them.
but it eventually works out for Apple's behalf somehow. And not to say that Apple is falling behind in machine learning. They are using machine learning tremendously. Like if you go to your phone app right now and type in chocolate, which I did the other day, it found every possible things that are chocolate. And I was like, okay, that's good. That's one step, in a progressive way of getting into the machine learning. But machine learning has so many capabilities, but the cost of it, right, I think is what holds a lot of the companies back, right? Uh, Opposite of Apple would be Google. They're using machine learning for every single thing, even as a failed product. If you don't have machine learning in it, don't talk about it, right? And because Google is such a data a generating company that they don't consider anything that is useful without machine learning. Like because machine learning is the ultimate giveaway of how you will scale that product and how you'll be able to sustain that product over time. Where Apple doesn't do it, then I'm thinking of privacy. Maybe Apple has some privacy issues, so I try to defend Apple on that matter. But at the same time, Apple just isn't moving as fast as Google is because Google has that dynamic presentation of itself. Is like we're a data company and we do everything with machine learning, which I love it. Like because they're doing a hell of a lot with TensorFlow and providing machine learning for users for free. This experience that Google is bringing to the table, I love it. Right. But Apple, back to the user interface with a reminder. I mean, you can just go on to talk about Apple being what it is today. In the future, you really have just a headset and a speaker, no device whatsoever, no infrastructure. It's just that you're looking at it and you're talking into it, and that you're not buying an Apple phone, you're buying Siri. Oh, let's see. SIRI as a service, a voice assistant as a service, rather than to just buy a full hardware that you have to replace every year, right? You can upgrade and pay for that upgrade to say like, SIRI Web 2.0, excuse me, not Web 2.0, but the version 2.0, you'll buy that every year rather than to buy a phone actually. I think only reason you will still need the hardware is because of taking pictures or something to do with cameras and something to do with other matrix that you use like NFC on your phone, right? You want to pay with your phone, you can't really pay over a voice, which would be actually cool if the voice was your biometrics that allows you to purchase things. Which I'm like, all right, that's not 5 years down the road. That's maybe 10, 20 years down the road. Because that's the possibility that voice can authenticate without with almost 99% accuracy that it is you that's authorizing the purchase. But yeah, I would love to have like Apple be that fast as Google with everything machine learning, everything is AI based. But I think Apple is a slow mover in this case.
I mean, you really see the difference. Like if I go to my Photos app on the iPhone, you really see the difference. Like they can't bring the search back properly, right? Like they only bring back a subset of the images with whatever search term I put in, whereas Google is much better, right, at sorting through whatever 10,000 photos and coming back with the correct 30 of them.
And that's that training, right? That's that training that Google does. That Apple, I believe, Apple is very slow to react. It could be $1 trillion industry, but they're not the fastest moving industry.
They do make a lot of money, so you can't be mad at them. They're
you
clearly doing a
can't you
lot of
can't
good
risk
things.
it sometime either, right? Because where Google has privacy issues, Apple's don't, right? Apple has that customer trust that they have built through these products. And look, I'm making the case for Apple's, like, as in Apple's defense, but at the same time, on my other side of my argument, I'm thinking to myself, like, maybe they're just that slow.
Right.
They don't really care about privacy. They just care more about, like, maybe not spend the money and make more this quarter rather than have more income down the future, right? Like, because I think anybody who's using machine learning, it's going to cost a lot today, and it has to cost a lot today for you to make more money down the road, right? And I'm saying money as in revenue, right? For Apple, it's revenue, but for any investor, it's just the money. You invest money into any machine learning today. If it's set up right, it will generate more than what any other technology in the future will. And I'm advocating for that. I'm advocating for the fact that machine learning, if you're not utilizing it, you're just wasting data, you're collecting data, or you're just not even seeing data, right? Because there's tremendous amount of data that machine learning can capture. And if you train the machine properly, you can utilize those data properly. You can have better usage of those data. But if you don't, and if today you're sitting there thinking like, oh, it costs too much money, like Apple is probably thinking, I think that's a wrong decision to make. I don't think that's the best move for Apple.
Yeah, I mean, with any of these things, and this is what I was talking about at the beginning, I think you really have to get your revenue model right, um, because it's not the technology that makes things successful, right? The technology is an ingredient into a successful business. Apple doesn't necessarily have the best technology, but they are arguably one of the most successful companies any of us have ever seen,
Right.
right? Because they get the business piece right. Now they're using technology to drive that business, but their choices in how they proceed and what they prioritize are based around the business, not purely around the tech, right? And they are just incredibly successful from a business perspective, regardless of whether their image search feature works as well as someone else's image search feature, right?
Look, I got to give it up to Google for not selling hardwares over and over. Rather, they're selling the software, right? If you bought a Google phone 3 years ago, your camera does better today than it did 3 years ago without ever changing hardware.
Right.
Because all they did is push a new software into the Google phone,
Yep.
and that Google phone captures better images using that 3-year-old hardware. Where best-selling Apple every year is that, oh, this one has 3 lens, so this one is the latest Apple, and this 3 lens catches from, I don't know, like 2 different angles more than what it used to. Like, you just keep doing hardware over and over. That's not gonna get you much into the future, because like I talk about infrastructure. I want to go back to that point of, you cannot keep developing more hardware because you're not recycling enough. Because recycling is one of the hardest things you can do, actually, and it's not solved yet how to recycle. So the hardware that you're able to access today and build today will not be available here in 10 years, because the resource you need from the earth is not there anymore, right? 10 years, 15 years, however long it takes to get to that point. You want to be software based. You want to be totally about coding and programming and machine learning and data, um, rather than to say, how do I keep making hardware every year instead of improving my software, right? I think bad model for anybody involved, right? Um, Goodness, I can go on talking about supply chain planning all day long, the disruption in it, the bad management. There's this geopolitics that happens when you have to talk about Taiwan making your semiconductor chips, yet China could block you at any time to disrupt your semiconductor chips that are coming into the manufacturing shop floor. We can talk about it all day long. But one of the great assets that we have as a North American country is that we are very invested into software. So for us to go back and say like, oh, we want to be hardware based, it's not going to work. I think Silicon Valley is the representative of all what a software can do. We need to do more of software. And the software development, it hits a ceiling when it comes to coding and programming after a while, right? So what do you do when coding and programming is not taking all the necessary actions it's supposed to take? You add machine learning to that, right? Um, once we come to that conclusion that hardware is not the answer, like Apple keeps selling us hardware and over, where Google is like, yeah, I sold you the same hardware 3 years ago, I'm just going to reuse it over and over, right? With software updates, and it works perfect. Works great. The user experience has increased because you've saved over $3,000 by not buying a new phone every year. You bought one Google phone and it works great 3 years later. Who could beat that kind of user experience?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know. I've seen a lot of amazing stuff accomplished with software, but it does take hardware to run the new software, especially when you start running processor-intensive tasks like machine learning and AI. So I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I think hardware will decrease in size. There will be less of a hardware, as in the IoT device within your home. There's small IoT devices around your home will talk to your IoT device that is currently your phone, right? To have a phone that is able to interact using machine learning technology with your IoT devices in your home, it will do more with less of a hardware, right? As in the semiconductor chips that we're developing right now, they are performing to a level that of course, better than last generation. But with each generation, they will provide more services from a smaller device. I think that's what Apple needs to focus on, or anybody who's thinking of like, how do I create this hardware? They will have to say like, the supply chain of that hardware. Where do I get the parts from? And if I can not secure it, how do I build it in home, like within 50 states, within the border of the United States, and have it with least amount of hardware, but just based on some semiconductor chips and internet and very least amount of wiring, right? How do I incorporate that with the rest of the IoTs that are already available, all the other hardwares, right? How do I get them to talk? So yeah, look, I'm not looking to see like the days where we don't have hardware at all, right? Only thing I ask though is that there's no more cable to charge the phones with.
That is
Like,
the last cable tethering us to the earth, man. That wireless electricity is coming. The human race needs to solve that one.
like we need to fix it in this generation, so the next generation, like, you used to have cables, so then like look at us and
That's
laugh
right.
at us, right?
That's right.
Like,
We
we used to
gotta
have
solve
cables.
I don't know, man. I'm just one of those guys that hold on to the old stuff, man. I really want to be somehow tethered. I want to
Right.
be grounded somehow. As much as I want to believe that being wireless is great, I understand that the wireless technology it's only half as fast. You know what I mean? The reality
True,
is,
that is true.
and so I think
True.
that it'd be nice. There's a lot of opportunity there. It's great having the wireless technologies, but I'm just old school. I'd wish that we still had a rotary phone. That's where I'm at. I like the challenge of hitting nine. I
It's
like
out there for you.
nine, and then watching that roll until it gets to the actual nine before I can hit it again.
So I
Yeah.
found it so funny the other day. I'm watching a show. I think it's like Del Toro's Scary Stories, and one of the scenes they did not even show the phone. They just made the noise of what a rotary phone makes noise. They probably couldn't find a prop to put it on the screen, so
There's
it just made the click, 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 click noise.
there's some funny videos on YouTube of like people handing rotary phones to kids, and the kids trying to figure out like how the thing works, and no one understands it. They're trying to talk to it or shit.
You know,
I'm gonna have to run soon
yeah,
because I got to hang out with my actual kids in real life before they go.
fair enough, fair
before they
enough.
before they start screaming and calling for you, right?
Yeah, they're like,
um,
Dad's talking to his computer again.
Yeah. Well, one more thing, just as another story, kind of leading on what you just left off on. I went to the gym, and I brought this story up once before, and I left my phone at home, and so I went to my car and my car wouldn't start because I drive an older vehicle and the battery, I never drive it. So the battery was out. So had enough battery to get to the gym. I come back, it doesn't want to turn on. So I asked the guy up front, as a kid, "Hey, can I use your phone?" And he says, "Yeah, sure." And I said, "Do I dial 9 to get out?" And he looked at me, I don't know. I've never used the phone. I don't know how to use it.
It's
He
great.
didn't know how to use a phone. A 16-year-old didn't know what 9 to get an outside line was.
That's
Wow.
fantastic.
That
And
used to be a standard question anywhere you went to the office, right? Any new job you started, like, do I dial 9 to get out?
yeah, it was just, but he's working the front desk. So at the end of the day, I was like, wow, that's where we are. We've given up our brains to
That's right.
technology, and it will
Amazing.
happen.
It will happen. It will happen. Look,
Thank you.
again, just to reiterate, hardware, love it, but there's not enough of them to go around. I think there's more demand for it worldwide. Again, advocating for Web 3.0, so that way when people are interacting in the next generation, they are not experiencing what we've experienced in Web 2.0 and Web 1.0. I just want to say that as a digital immigrant, because the next generation will be digital native, right?
Right.
I had to adapt to digital system. Lucky did, and I know Mike did. So, as a digital immigrant, I would say it's for us to kind of bring that awareness for the digital natives to be aware of these kind of lack of perspective, right? So we bring that perspective as digital immigrants for the digital natives, like my son or your son and Lucky's son, right? It's important that we also bring up the next generation of technology. What are the possibilities? So that way, whoever is investing money into this next Uber, or whoever is investing money into the next startup that will replace Airbnb or even Apple, who knows, right? They understand that, look, you got Web 3.0, somebody else will build it. Blockchain, somebody else can help you build it. But machine learning is your duty. Like, as in, that is something that you have to know from the scratch, from the bottom, because that's what's going to create your user experience that much faster and that much more scalable.
Mhm.
I just want to throw that out there because a lot of people are seeing blockchain as a conversation, but machine learning is not part of the conversation as much, right? Because machine learning is kind of like layered under all the other layers of the complexity, like APIs, blockchain, Web 3.0, all the words that comes in, and there's like, where's machine learning, and I guess the joke is like at the end of the conversation, they always throw out machine learning just to end the conversation. They're like, we're going to add machine learning to that. How? Oh, well, hang up the call because we don't know how.
A lot of buzzwords.
So I'm still excited. AyAyAyAi. What do you say, Mike? How do you feel?
AyAyAyAi.
Oh, he raised his hands up and he waited for it.
Oh, he did it. I felt it, and unfortunately I can't match the energy.
But,
Aye, brother. Good job.
so, Mike, any departing word, any departing thoughts for you?
I mean, again, the favorite thing for me as someone who helps startups and launches my own startups is finding that intersection, right? And we were talking about the book "The Future Is Faster Than You Think" by Peter Diamandis. There's an intersection of technologies, right? So we've been talking about Web3 and AI and machine learning, right? The intersection there creates lots of opportunities. I think there's also an intersection between the future and today, right? So we can get all excited about this technology, but if we want to build a business today, it has to be grounded in reality. But we don't want to lose sight of how cool the future is going to be, right? So the business today is a path to get to that future state that we know we're going to get to. And so, I don't know, it's always like a balance for me.
Well said.
Lucky.
Well said. Thank you for today being part of our podcast, and thank you for educating us today.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you guys. These are always, this was great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Mike. Looking forward to the next chapter, and we'll have to do more of these so we can keep up with Web 3.0 and blockchain. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Perfect.